So I'm Kara. I'm the assistive tech specialist at the Berrien RESA. I'll let the rest of the team introduce themselves really quick.
We'll kind of go in order on the screen there. So I'm Gail Evans. I am from Allegan and Van Buren counties. I do assistive technology in both of those counties.
I'm Katie Butsu. I'm assistive technology specialist and occupational therapist with Bay Aranac ISD.
Amber Maxwell, early childhood special education teacher at COPESD.
Hi, I'm Amber Wade, assistive technology consultant here at Wayne RESA.
Awesome. We got a great team ahead of us. If anybody ever has any questions about what we go over during these sessions, feel free to reach out to anybody on that screen. So first, we're going to do our welcome. We're going to do our updates. And then we're going to talk about closing the gap and talking AAC. I know we had a lot of people go to those conferences. I'm going to drop a link in a chat in a minute here. It looks like we didn't get a ton of people who wanted to share out about what they learned there, but we would love to hear from you. If you don't want to share, we understand. We've got Katie with some great information later on, but want to hear from you guys as well. So after that, we're going to network. We're going to talk a little bit about the share out from Closing the Gap and talking AAC, talk a little bit about yourselves, go into breakout rooms so you can get some good conversation going. And then we'll talk about what is new and noteworthy. We have our Padlet. Again, feel free to add into the Padlet if you have any new tools that you would like to share out today. And if we have some time, we'll do a solution room. And then after that, we'll be wrapping up. Welcome. So we'll start with just our updates. So we'll start with our Alt-Shift updates. Do we have Carolyn in here today?
I'm here.
Hi, Carolyn. What's going on at Alt-Shift?
Can I actually share my screen? Will you stop sharing yours?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the big thing, if you've been in a conversation with me at all in the last 6 months, Sarah Percolosi and I have been diligently working on getting modules up for our building blocks to autonomous communication, and all 12 are up. So they're over on EduPaths, and I'll share links once I'm finished sharing. But they range between 15 minutes, which is really just the getting started, why was this created, that sort of thing, to 30 minutes, 45 or 60 minutes. I don't think any of them are longer than that. No. So we have a getting started module, then we have all of our blocks. So blocks 1 through 7, which is fun and fantastic. We also have added a frequently asked questions, more deeper dive into emergent literacy and conventional literacy. So there have been a lot of questions in the trainings about alternative pencils, or how do you support classrooms that have students with both emergent and conventional. So our statewide trainers were fabulous and worked on that over the summer. And then we also have a pod module, so you don't have to worry about what YouTube videos are good or not. My apologies, guys. And then a now what, like an implementation module of, I've got all this information, now what do we do with it? So those 60 minutes or 45 minutes aren't just Sarah and myself talking at a screen. We really were excited to interview AAC users, parents of AAC users, educators, administrators, and people out in the community who have helped support AAC users as well. So there's a lot more than just the same content that you've heard before. So these are all free for Michigan educators. You guys can link your LMS, especially if you have Canvas, I think is the one that is linked right through EduPaths, but I'll also link in the chat how to get it if you don't have an LMS, like I don't have one, but it's free. You get sketches for it. And then the math side of our project right now is also working on adding some math modules. So those are up and coming. We just don't know when they're going to be up officially yet. But that's the biggest thing over here in Alt-Shift. We're very excited. They are all officially up and ready to go.
That is so amazing. Does anybody have any questions for Carolyn about those modules, about anything else Alt-Shift wide before we keep going? Giving 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. Feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions about that. Do we have Nikki here today for our Michigan Schools in Action? Sounds like she didn't make it to the meeting. Is anybody else in Michigan Schools in Action that would like to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with your group?
I attended the last meeting, but then they had canceled the most recent one. So I know that there really wasn't an update because I think it was just so close to talking AAC and there was a lot of people at that. I believe the next one is coming up pretty soon. I'll double check the date. I can share that out.
Awesome. We'll throw it in the chat when we find it.
It
Thanks,
is this
Katie.
Friday at 12:30.
Sweet. All right, so hopefully next time we'll have an update there. Do we have an LIO update today?
Yes, hi, this is Beth Brabs.
Hi, Beth.
Good to be here. Hi. We don't have tons going on technology wise in at LIO right now, but we are planning to do a train the trainers about how to do AT assessments for students who are blind or visually impaired. And that's going to be a 3-day workshop. It's on January 13th, March 24th, and May 5th. The first 2 sessions are online, and then the third session is in person. And I think registration just opened for that. So we're excited that we're going to be offering that again. The presenters are Ann McKay-Bacon and Nancy Ozinga.
That is awesome. So is that open to anybody in the state, or is that just for group members?
It's open to anybody in the state, and I can put the link to that in the chat.
Sounds great. Definitely do that. That sounds fantastic. And we'll throw that information in for our next meeting as well, so that people can have access to it going forward.
Right.
I took part of that maybe last year or 2 years ago, and it
Okay.
was all virtual, but I loved it. And I teamed up with my VI people. And so it's a great reason to collaborate with your VI person. As an AT person, collaborate with them. And it's such a powerful team. You know, I just feel like we both learned stuff from there. So they learned more AT stuff. I learned more VI stuff. And so it was really, really good.
It's good. It's good to hear you say that. This year, we're going to spend a little bit more time actually looking at assessment that's been like looking at videos of assessments and practicing how to write a report about an AT assessment. So, because I know that in the past, we haven't focused a lot on report writing, but we want to give people an opportunity to learn a little bit more about that and to actually do some practice with it.
That sounds fantastic. Really looking forward to that. Does anybody else have any questions for Beth before we move on?
We still have our AT library. I don't know if I think we've told you about that before, but on our website, we have a link under the technology page in, you kind of have to go in a roundabout way to get to it because our technology is part of our expanded core curriculum. But I can also get that and open that up and put it in the chat for everybody so that you can see what AT we have that's specific to people with visual impairments that are available for loan.
Absolutely. That would be fantastic.
Okay, good. I don't know if we get new people in this group occasionally, but
I think people pop in and out for meetings. So any
right.
information that you have, we'll take those links.
All right, I'll put it in there.
Thank
I
you.
do know we're all busy people and we forget, and it's nice to have it all at our fingertips. So
Well, another thing that's really good that I'll add to this too is there's an assistive apps page that's really pretty cool. If you go in, it's got a filter on the left side where you can put in whether you're looking for an Android or an iOS device or Microsoft, or if you're looking for something that's web-based, and then you can put in what accessibility features you need, what the subject is and what the age range is of the student. And then when you click all those and click apply, you end up getting a list of apps that are appropriate for that specific student and that specific subject area. So I'll put that link in, and then also our AT guidelines are pretty cool. So if you're working with students who are visually impaired and you want to know what's expected of a student who has a visual impairment when it comes to learning AT at what age levels, that's also a really good resource. And it's also a nice place for you to track the things that you've done with students. So it's a document that you can download to your device, and you can write right in it information about what you've done with the student and what their progress has been. And then there are also in the document some guidelines for activities that you can do to support certain standards that are in the guidelines, because these guidelines were taken from the ISTE standards, International Society for Technology and Education, and the MITEX, which is Michigan Integrated Technology Competencies for Students. So those were, they used that as a guide when they created this for the students who are visually impaired.
Those are super helpful. I didn't even have
Good.
some of those links, so thank you for throwing those in there.
Yep, you're welcome.
And Amber Maxwell has taken notes, so she'll have all of this in the notes too. That will go out
Great.
later.
Awesome.
Any questions or concerns? I will say that one of my big things is I went to a conference in October, beginning of October, where I learned a lot about coding and accessible coding for some products that are designed to help students learn coding. And I'm really hoping to get something put together for our students here in Michigan who are visually impaired, maybe like some kind of coding club or something like that. And these products that, one of the products that I really want to use is called Code Jumper. And it is designed for visually impaired people, but it's also a pretty amazing product, something I had never even done. I'd never done anything with coding before. And I thought, oh, no way could I do that. Well, now I understand what coding is, and it's really not as complicated. Well, at least at a beginning level, it's not as complicated as I thought it might be. And so I'm really geeked about sharing this with people. I can put something in the yep, there it is, the Code Jumper. Thank you to SI Consultants for putting that on there. It's a really cool program, product that has programs available that go with it. There's a whole curriculum online for it. And it really, I think, is something that could be used by everyone, regardless of whether they even have a disability, to help them understand what coding is all about.
I love to hear that.
Great. Thanks for putting that in the chat.
All right. Do we have updates from our POHI and our XXI group?
Yeah, so our next Lunch and Learn is December 7th. And we're actually going to be having a little bit of a VI focus as part of that meetings, which will be great. Our group is, as a 501c3, is like back up and running, and we're having regular meetings. So if you're interested in joining that organization, we're always welcoming folks from across the state to participate. Tentatively, our in-person full-day conference will be in Traverse City at the end of April 2024. So it'll either be the 22nd or 29th. They're both Mondays, where we'll be like finalizing a date. Come by February, we'll have the date completely nailed down. But we're excited. We have rooms tentatively booked for up there. And yeah, we're excited to get this conference going and planning it. And if you have any ideas about what you would like to see out of a POHI SXI conference, or anything like that, please, send me an email or Megan Graham or any of us on the group, and we'll be happy to discuss your ideas or take any help. So we're excited.
Awesome. Amber, do you want to throw your email and Megan's email in the chat in case anybody wants to reach out to you for that? Awesome. Thank you. All right, so regional updates, both Region 2 and Region 3 are getting their meetings started back up. Yay! So for
Okay.
Region 2, does Katie want to start?
Yeah, for Region 2, we had our beginning stages. There was 5 of us that were able to meet, and we are planning to open that up to everyone in our region. So the more the merrier. I know that link, just to kind of RSVP, did go live. That was supposed to be shared out. So if you are part of the region and you didn't receive an email, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can get you on that email list as well. Our first meeting as a group is going to take place on December 13th, and we'll be hosting those meetings in Genesee County at Genesee ISD, and they're scheduled from 9 to 2 for our first in-person meeting. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. And then for Region 3, I am a part of this one, but if you want a little break from my voice, Gail, do you want to talk a little bit about our Region 3 meetings?
Sure. Yeah, we're just getting ours started up. Also, we have 3 scheduled for this year. Our first one is this Thursday. It's December 1st, whatever day that is. And ours are an hour and a half long, virtual. And then we're hoping next year to increase all of that, the number of times and the length of it. But right now they're being run as a theme of access to all, getting more access to everyone. In our first session, one of the main focus is on behavior and assistive technology. So how AT can help with behavior in the classroom as well as in therapies. So we're kind of excited about that.
Awesome. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to Gail or I, and we can get you the link. All right. So next we want to talk about the AT consideration document. It's finally done and it looks amazing. Kristen, are you here to talk a little bit about it?
I am. And you're right. It is finally done. This has been a labor of love, taken some time. And thank you to Pat Love, who was very kind and patient and went through the different documents and shared what looked good from an accessibility standpoint, what we needed to tweak. Because if you make something pretty and then go back and make it accessible, that is the wrong way to go about things. So lesson learned. But I'm going to share in the chat. There ended up being a couple different iterations so that we can practice what we preach and ensure that it is accessible. Now, I will say, ideally, it would just be one document for everybody. You know, we're all going through the same door sort of thing. But every once in a while, especially with a flow chart, I'm learning it's just really tricky. So it's been edited as much as possible to be accessible. But at the end of the day, if you are using a screen reader, you can't make the reading order. Long story short, there is a secondary version to be most accessible for those using a screen reader. So I'm going to put in the chat all the different links. Because then too, for high contrast colors, if you're looking on a screen, there's one that's ideal, but then if you're going to print, the black font does look better when you print it out. It's easier to read. So the talking points is just kind of why this flowchart was created, how to go about using it, the intended audience, and then the flowchart if you're going to print it off for IEP teams, then if you're going to use it just electronically, and then lastly, if you know a user that is using a screen reader, you would want to share that last one that's more of an outline format. And Carolyn at one point had said Alt-Shift could also be another segue to share these documents out. But feel free to share because our group worked hard over COVID to synthesize lots of documents because, you know, AT consideration documents are not new, but some of them are really meaty. And so your typical IEP teams don't have the energy or the time to digest those and know what to do with them. So our hope was that this is a one-ish pager that can be easily digested so that teams put some thought into that checkbox under special factors.
Absolutely. It really does look fantastic. Thank you for all the work for this. If anybody has any questions before we keep it moving?
This is Beth Brabs. Do you want me to see about whether we can put a link on the tech website or web page for MDELIO so that people can find this who are working with visually impaired folks?
My first thought is yes. There was
Okay.
several others that worked with me. So if anybody else is on this work group or anybody that supports AT in general, if you guys want to speak up to that, but on there is accessible educational materials. And I feel like
Mhm.
that is something that teams don't always consider.
Mhm.
But it's especially important for that population. So
Okay. I'll see if we can put it on ours.
My first thought was also, that sounds great.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the VI people go to MDE and they don't get to Alt Shift, but we are trying to change that because we've been talking about Alt Shift when we have meetings, so.
All right, cool. So I think next up, we're going to be talking about our conferences. So we're talking about Talking AAC and Closing the Gap today. So let's see what we've got. We do have one little short video before we go.
I never would have thought about that. How do they even come up with that? It's genius. Afterwards, you think, my ideas are so obvious, I'll never be as inventive as that. I get this feeling often. Amazing books, music, movies, or even amazing conversations. I'm in awe at how the creator thinks like that. I'm humbled. But I continue to do my work. I tell my little tales. I share my point of view. Nothing spectacular, just my ordinary thoughts. So one day someone emailed me and said, I never would have thought about that. How did you even come up with that? It's genius. Of course I disagreed and I explained why it was nothing special. But afterwards I realized something surprisingly profound. Everybody's ideas seem obvious to them. I'll bet even John Coltrane or Richard Feynman felt that everything they were playing or saying was pretty obvious. So maybe what's obvious to me is amazing to someone else. Hit songwriters in interviews often admit that their most successful hit song was one they just thought was stupid and not even worth recording. We're clearly a bad judge of our own creations. We should just put it out and let the world decide. Are you holding back something that seems too obvious to share?
So that video is kind of an inspiration for us to share today, right? To think about those of you who went to Closing the Gap and to Talking AAC, even if you think, oh, we already know that, I've been doing this for years or whatever, there may be other people that who are as old as me and have forgotten it, or perhaps it's new to them. And so anyway, just want to give you a little pep talk and have people share some of the stuff that they learned at Talking AAC and Closing the Gap. And it looks like we're going to start with Talking AAC. And so we're going to share out for about 10 or 15 minutes on Talking AAC. And we forced Katie to put stuff in there already. We know other people have some stuff too. But so while Katie shares a couple of things, if other people kind of get ready to help share out too, that would be great.
All right, I'll take the stage now. So from Talking AAC, I put in links for two of the sessions that I attended that I found super beneficial. The first one was related to AAC and especially related to CVI. There seems to be a lot of talk today about vision, which is awesome. So it was presented by Linda Burkhart and Matt, I'm going to say his last name wrong, Fusion. So if I said that wrong, I apologize. And this was a hybrid one. So they did present virtually. Some of the things that that they had shared out is really like when we're looking at CVI and those key characteristics around CVI, you know, things like high contrast and what the images should look like, the detail, and then really pairing it with AAC. And when you're looking at tool selection, looking at what some of the softwares out there offer and how those can be customized to best meet the needs of an individual with a CVI. So they talked a lot about CVI heavy and kind of like the nature of CVI. And I thought it was like a really good refresher for me because I think like we learn about it in college and, you know, I do it every day, but then it was just nice to kind of come back to the anatomy and the neuro side of things and really just looking at what are the expectations as far as things improving. And then also just kind of looking at like, it's ultimately like an unknown, right? So we really don't know exactly what the individual is able to see or not able to see. They did a link to like a CVI simulator. And so you were able to kind of feel what it felt like to feel like that visual clutter and a lot kind of visually overstimulating. So that I thought was pretty neat. Some of the other things that I found to be just really beneficial around AAC systems and just kind of that selection piece went back to some of the research that they did. So I'm going to scroll down here. They did research that really took each representation of different things. So looking at real life images versus more of the picture icons, looking at black and white versus colored, and looking at that like level of detail. Apologize while I scroll. And then looking at text versus no text. There's a very nice little image in here. Apologize, this was a long session, but it was very, very beneficial. They had a lot of video representation of them as well. Let's see here. Yes. I wanted to find, oh yeah, right here. So what we found out, they said like from top being the most that an individual would be able to see related to AAC, and then the bottom being like the most difficult or most challenging for someone to see. So first one would be realistic photographs, next one realistic color images, next one abstract color images, next being realistic black and white images, and then that last one being abstract black and white images. And I thought this was really interesting because obviously a lot of AAC softwares that are out there are more of those abstract icons. So I thought that that was pretty interesting because I know, at least in my background and my experience so far, is we often hear like, you know, maybe getting rid of like the detail on some of the things. So like when I've worked with RVI specialists specifically, you know, at times, like if there is a picture, thinking of like PRC products in their Apple and like maybe removing like the little glare on it or things like that. But it was interesting kind of them thinking like, well, no, they're actually saying like it's best. And what the research supported was actually that real life photo, because that if you think about it and say the individual was only seeing a very small portion and they only saw just the little leaf on it, they might have made out that it was an apple based on that leaf, where maybe somebody would have cut that out because they're like, well, that's an added, you know, distraction visually. So I thought for me, that was a learning curve. And I think that that was put into perspective. What we kind of also see, at least in the classrooms I service, is we have a couple kiddos that maybe are trialing a software that uses more abstract photos. And we've seen that they maybe do better when they're doing like a choice board with real photos. And then that's, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because that contextual piece of it. And when we go back to like CVI and really understanding that it's that processing or that perception piece of it, it really made sense to me. So feel free to chime in if anyone else went to this session and has anything else to add, but those were the things that I took home that I found to be really helpful and put into light for me.
Katie, this is Beth. I'm so glad you mentioned this part of the presentation because this is a big issue for our students who have CVI, and not just when it comes to communication boards, but also or you know, devices, but any learning with a kid with CVI. And when I see students who are expected to look at one of those sheets that has a gazillion pictures that are all abstract on it, and they're a CVI kid, and I've heard speech therapists say, but this is what we use in our district. I have to say, it's okay that that's what you use, but it's okay to adapt it for somebody who can't access that too.
I agree. And I thought like when they showed these slides specifically, like I was like, okay, that like really, really like just shows like that you really don't, it's not an acuity thing, right? It's not that precision piece, but really that processing. And I was like looking at this and it's like, okay, so like the slide and then the individual
Yes.
answer, the response was ladder, like really like they only saw that little small quadrant, and without that it's like, you know, I think contextually that was really interesting to me. And I've seen a lot in my time as too is like you know, like I've heard like less is more with color, and I'm like, well, that was really interesting to me too, because they said like the black and white drawing being like the, I guess, least effective, the
Yes.
most challenging for them. So I
Yes.
thought it was really interesting. And, you know, and obviously when we think about like that fine line between offering a robust system, right? But then it's like, is it too much visual clutter, and like finding that like sweet spot. So for me, this was a really good presentation. I shared this out with our VI consultants right after, and they thought it was really, really beneficial information as well. So,
Awesome.
yeah. All right. Ooh, I'm just doing too many things. I apologize. All right, let me move back here. All right, so the next one that I shared out was the impacts on praise and praise and language intervention implementations for AAC. Excuse me. This one was presented by Sophia Benson Goldberg. And she had presented on the research that they have been doing related to really like that feedback. And so this one was like, I was like, oh, I must be doing everything wrong. So I don't know if anyone else went to that session and felt that way, but I know she kind of, you know, wasn't necessarily to do that or to shame us, but really to like bring awareness to really what the research supported regarding praise. And one of the big things that stood out to me was around praise in AAC, is I think naturally as like maybe the child's first success with an AAC is like, yay, you said go. And they had really talked about like how the minute that you kind of offer that praise, that you're kind of almost shutting down the conversation. And I'm naturally like a praiser. And so I was like, okay, so kind of trying to learn how to turn that down a bit has been an area of opportunity for myself. And I know that like we naturally, you know, even we see that a lot with our families, right? So like, they're like, oh my God, they said go for the first time. And so, but like naturally, if I was talking to somebody else and they said go, I'm not gonna be like, yay, you said go. So really keeping that naturalistic conversation. So it was a good awareness piece for me. Some of the other things that they talked about around praise that I thought was interesting was also even like, because my background, I used to be a feeding therapist. And so I think I go back to that also within feeding. So when we learned about like, you know, if a child is like, ugh, and then you're like, oh, is it gross? And then we're already kind of putting that idea in their head that that food is yucky or gross. And so really using positive language around that. And so that was interesting. They talked about like praise related to experiences. So like if a child is coming down a slide and they went down the slide and you're naturally like, oh my gosh, yay, you went down the slide, that you kind of already are innately like making them feel that they should have liked that experience as the slide, but maybe they actually hated it. But now that they know that they got that reaction out of you, they talked about not interrupting play. So that part was also a hard thing for me to think about, because I think of like in a self-contained classroom and like not really having those peer models to communicate throughout their day, you know, wanting to almost like interject or kind of push into their play. So finding that balance with praise is definitely eye-opening for me. They talked about different types of specific praise as well. And then I liked this part. It says, compliance is frequently the intended outcome of praise. So it's assumed that you're almost like managing that behavior that way. So, but they talked a lot about like that diminishes that opportunity, especially related to coming back to that communication AAC side of things, of like the minute that you're kind of offering that praise, that you're kind of almost shutting down the opportunity for the child to maybe spontaneously say more after. And kind of the best ways to respond to things. So they talked about different types of techniques related to response. And expanding, kind of recasting what the child has said, things like that. and then what praise as a response, and how that can, like I said, negatively almost affect that language and what they had to say. Anybody on that one? Did anyone else go to that? Or any feedback on that one?
I think that's really interesting. I really hadn't thought about that before because I totally praise my students all the time, especially in Touch Chat. There's that button that says like good, and then it auto populates job. So I'm using that all day long, but praise isn't typically a part of a traditional conversation. So inserting it randomly in for an AAC user definitely switches things up.
Yeah, it makes sense to me in perspective, but I definitely was like, wow, I'm guilty of that.
I
So,
noticed Carolyn dropped in the chat that she found this, so that she went to the session and also can like how she parents as well. But in early childhood, not praising kids has been a big thing for quite some time, and people really struggle with why wouldn't we praise kids? And this just continues to go on off of why it's important that, you know, kids are not just being given praise in a way that doesn't lead to meaningful outcomes for them.
yeah, it brought me back to like kind of like the conscious discipline and all of that stuff. But then I was like, yeah, when I think about talking and I think about like a child's success of maybe doing something for the first time, I think it's just so innate naturally that we're like their cheerleader. So I feel like that's something, like I said, an area of opportunity for me, because I still am like, oh, yep, still did it.
Before we move on to closing the gap, I was just going to throw out, I'm wondering, I'm really interested in how to support teachers, gen ed teachers, and how to support them in supporting AAC in their classroom. And I've seen a couple of things on AAC in the clouds. It was really good. But so anyway, I didn't know if anyone saw it, anything at the Talking AAC conference, if they have any resources for that. And then even though I'm talking about the Talking AAC, I want to switch to Closing the Gap. And let's find a couple of resources about that. And then we're going to break into breakout rooms so that you can discuss some of the resources that we talked about or that are linked on the documents.
Yay, Amber. I'm like, I need
Yeah,
my
I'll give Katie a break since she
Thank
just
you.
like, went on. So I'll be brief. So there was a good group of us that went to Closing the Gap. There were 7 of us from Michigan, and we had a real good time. That being said, there were a couple of sessions that like really stood out to me. On the form, the bottom 2 I added, they were from the same presenters. They were from New York, and it was about kind of like that switch use and, making switch activated toys. We even got to make a switch activated toy. Mine's not working. I have to tape my wires, but the switch works. So that was super fun, making my own switch, which was a good time. In the playing with switches slide deck, I really like because they laid out switch considerations and kind of like the progress like that you would want to go through with doing switch activated toys and all that sort of stuff, laid out in a really nice clean way. And then the top one that I added, the spectrums of adapted solutions, that was put on by one of the vendors. It was his name was Bryce. He's one of the accessibility people with Microsoft, and I think he mainly focuses in the gaming world, but he was heavily involved, I think, in some of the new adaptive products that Microsoft just released at the beginning of November. They're like mouse and joystick and all that you can like 3D print different like pieces to go with it and connect to it. And all that, and kind of remind like of other things that Microsoft has that are accessible and different downloads, like the I think it's called like Power Toys, which is like a way you can make like your keyboard and stuff like very specific and create all these like key commands and just different things like that. So I thought that was like a really good session, and he was like very informative and like helpful. So that's kind of like my crash course of like some of the things that were really good. I also went to a session on Bluetooth connectivity with wheelchairs. And like 80% of that session was like well above my head as someone who like, has a vague familiarity with like wheelchair stuff, but like in terms of connecting devices to it, would be very novice. But ultimately kind of like the gist of that session was that when, whether it's the PT, the school-based PT or outside PT, whoever's like mainly working with the wheelchair vendor, it's important that that vendor knows what the end goal is for that student. Is it connecting a Tobii to it? Is it connecting multiple devices to it? They need to know that, like, even if they're not at that point where they're driving with a Tobii yet, they need to know that when that wheelchair is being ordered, because, Bluetooth isn't as universal as one thinks. All these different devices connect differently with the Bluetooth. Some will connect as a mouse, some connect as a different way. Like, it's very complicated. And that's kind of like the gist of like the hour-long session I went to is Bluetooth is complicated, it's weird, and it's just important that whatever the end goal is for that student to be able to do with their wheelchair and their assistive technology is that needs to be like made clear to the vendor so the right stuff gets ordered and put together. So that's my closing the gap crash course.
I was gonna say, and to add just to Amber, her first two resources that she had shared out, the playing with switches and the toy adapting workshop, she had mentioned they're from New York. Those are actually the New York chapter leaders from Makers Making Change that we talked about on our last Lunch and Learn. Loretta especially, she does a phenomenal job of like hosting online builds too, that you can kind of join virtually and learn to build some of the switches that can be found in that library as well. So she does a great job leading their state. Some of the things I put in, that first link for tips for increasing family involvement with AAC at home. I thought that this presentation was awesome. It was Kelly Key, and she did a great job of just kind of showing like different things that they do to really bridge that gap between school and home. One of the things that they do is provide a like a virtual it's like a virtual support group for families. And that's something that I actually took that idea and I'm implementing it now with our ISD starting in January. And really the focus is like 10 minutes of PD for families on AAC, but then the larger focus is really just kind of allowing time for Q&A and parents to kind of collaborate and build a community. So that's something that she's got some really great resources for on there. And they've had some really good success with that as well. The next one was the Maker Movement in AT. So if you haven't heard of Therese Wilkham or if you've seen her in the past, she presented on her some of the things that she does inside of Maker World and how she makes different stands and different switches using corrugated plastic and recycled materials. Her big thing is 5 minutes or less, $5 or less. And she has a new book that's out. So that link will kind of show you the resource for purchasing that. It is available online on Amazon. And the books are nice because it's QR heavy. So there's lots of QR codes in there to purchase any of the materials, and then lots of different QR codes to different links to guide you on how to build. The next one was the synergetic approach to therapy. This was more like outpatient focused, but it was a speech therapist and an occupational therapist, and they talked about synergetic sessions versus co-treatment. And the idea is that no child is almost seen solely. They do a lot of co-treating, speech and OT, but they overlap all of their sessions. So they're both each individually seeing a child at a time. And the reason I liked this one is they do a lot of, I guess, co-treatment type focused approaches, and the fact that they would maybe do like a switch adapted activity, but then pull language into it. So they had some really great ideas in there. I know our speech therapist that I get to work alongside with, we do a lot of co-treatments and we do groups within our ECSE classrooms. And I will definitely be implementing some of the ideas that I found in here, because one of the ones they did was a switch adapted for winter. They did switch adapted like water skiing or bobsledding, and they took little pool noodles and they cut them and they put little figurines, and they used a power link and a hair dryer to like make them go in the water. So I thought that was super fun for that cause and effect and engagement. So that was a super neat one. The next one is the adapted play in early childhood. This was a very much a crash course. So this was like 170 like slides. So I did include just some of the resources that I found beneficial. I've seen Drawn to AAC before in the past, but I hadn't really been using it. I did end up purchasing a couple things from their Teachers Pay Teacher website now, just for some slide decks that I was using in presentations, things like that. So they do have some free resources on there, but if not, they do have some paid ones as well. The other thing I found really beneficial is this link to Fat Brain toys. So I love Fat Brain. Anything Fat Brain is like usually my favorite, but they've created a almost like a housing area or library for toys specifically for individuals with special needs. So they broke it down right by topic. So for example, like if I click on vision impairment, it'll give you some of their toys that could specifically target those areas. I thought that was a great resource, especially with the holidays coming up. And then the last one, I didn't actually go to this session, but I just found this to be a beneficial resource. But this is 50 ways to get hundreds of switch hits a day. So lots of different fun activities for engagement with voice activated switches. So that is
Awesome.
all I have. Yes.
Thank you guys so much for sharing out. These are really great sessions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm sure they have a little bit more information on them, and all the handouts are linked in that doc, which is in our chat. So we just have a few more minutes here today. So I think we're going to go to our breakout rooms next. So if we could get back to the slideshow, Katie.
Yep.
Whoever it ended up.
Yeah, where'd it go?
I'm the queen of having 100 tabs and never knowing which one the music's coming from, so I understand.
Well, I had all these resources pulled up from presenting before. Just a little bit. Hold on one second. I gotta find my way back home here. I lost it. Hold on. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second.
You guys are totally fine. So we'll throw these in the chat, but as we're getting into the groups, we just want you to introduce yourself. Want you guys to talk about a takeaway from today's share of Talking AAC and Closing the Gap. And then we have a little Google form. We want to hear any future PDs that you know of that might interest you, might interest others, any information that you're hoping to get a little bit more of, so that when we're gathering resources to share out to you, it can be tailored to what you're looking for. So as we flow into the groups, I'll see you guys later. All right, well, we only have a couple minutes left. So we have our new and noteworthy, our Padlet. Let's see, here's the QR code for that, which is perfect timing over there. So I know I added something to the Padlet this time around. It doesn't look like anybody else did. So I'll just go over it really fast. I know we're running up on the end of the session here. So one thing that I wanted to share out is a tool called VoiceIt. I learned about this tool last year and it was cool then, but it's way cooler now. The technology is just rapidly evolving. So it was born out of wanting people with disabilities and with speech impediments to be able to access home devices like Alexa to say, like, turn off the lights, turn on the lights. There's so many things you can do with tools like that. But if you have disordered speech, she won't be able to pick up on it. So it was born out of training individual phrases with disordered speech. So the program would recognize what you were saying, and then it would spit that phrase back out to the Alexa so it could control it in that way. But there is a new beta version of this. The adult one is 13 up, is up right now. And then the pediatric version, I believe, is coming out in a couple weeks. And what it is it's live transcription for disordered speech. And I think that this is an amazing opportunity for those students who maybe need to use augmentative and alternative communication, but are more on the augmentative side. They don't need to use it full time. They still have speech, even if you can't understand it. So it's not individual phrases like the predecessor, but what it is a large onboarding process where you will train about 1,000 phrases, but then it will pick up on your patterns and be able to do live transcription of your speech. So it will spit it out in text form and out loud and kind of translate what you're saying for somebody who has an untrained ear. That's really cool. There are opportunities to build it into Zoom for our older students. I think Google Meet has something moving on that too. The technology is still in the early stages, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Does anybody else have anything new and noteworthy in our last 30 seconds here? All right. Well, that's us for today. Thank you guys so much for hopping on. We had some good conversations. Thank you to everybody who shared out. Feel free to add again into that Google form if you have specific information you're hoping to get a little bit more of. And we have some upcoming PDs that are linked here. Creative Makers is great. We have McCall, SLIP, and ATIA coming up as well. And then Katie, do you want to talk really quick about what this is?
Yeah, just I know several of you maybe have attended. Myself and Mark Lyons, he is now with Saginaw ISD, did a REMC funded statewide project for Creative Makers, where we use a Makey to create switch adapted like OT and speech interventions, but then also just switches in general. This is going to be a free training upcoming on December 15th, and it's a full day. So if you come out to it, you'll get some hands-on learning. I know earlier in the presentation, they talked about coding. So you'll get a little bit of understanding of more simplistic block coding and how to create switches using things like bubble wrap and cardboard. Also creating adapted I've made paint brushes. I've created a ton of different things. So when we do that, we kind of highlight the why behind our session. There's a little YouTube link to our YouTube if you kind of want to see it. It's hard to explain over Zoom. So kind of to see some of the things that we've created, and you can come out and learn. And lunch will be provided at that as well, and it's free. So if you're interested, feel free to click on the link in there to register. The form to register is also located on that QR code on the previous slide.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending, and we'll see you at the next one.